Good morning. I would just like to once more reply uh, to Mr. Everson's most recent response to my to my response last night. Um, I would just like to point out, and for reference, French is a language that I enjoy speaking, and it is also cultural and historical to the state of Sandus. It's the first language, first national language that we had under the Grand Lieutenant of Santa Festigan. Um, you may not believe that our newspaper, by the way, it is technically an official journal. You may not think that it is accurate, um, but it doesn't necessarily report on inter-micronational affairs that often. Uh, it typically only reports on issues of the state, and it's the only news agency that you'll see coming from Sandus. And it even though it does report on intermicronational affairs, most always those affairs have to do with Sandus in some way or another. So it is the viewpoint not only of Sandus, but it is also the only news agency that you will receive news from the state of Sandus. And just regardless of the wording that we use, which, by the way, is intentional, which may be part of the reason why you think it is inaccurate, um, it is intentional, and it's still important um, because well, because that is the way that it's written. Um, but I still believe that Mr. Everson uh, that he should most likely read the prior articles and conduct more research before actually speaking uh, against something. Um, if you don't put, as you quote, uh, if you don't put your time checking my newsletter, which by the way, again, is an official journal, then you must not have actually read the article concerning his response. And uh, if you did actually read his response, then you were reading our newsletter, as you put it. And the failure to do your own research on your own just merely undermines your own argument. Because, quite frankly, um, the article concerning his invitation and the article concerning his response were side by side. So you really could have done research that way. And that leads us into the next issue, the naming of articles. The naming of articles on Freedom Sandus is always symbolic. Uh, they're meant to be both poetic and rhetorical, so that in the beginning, when someone isn't sure what it's about, um, they're curious, and that attracts them in. Um, and then after reading the article, they can think about the connections between the text of the article and the title of the article. So it's both a poetic and a rhetorical uh, usage of both, or well, of the title. And you claim, Mr. Everson claims that um, the dossier was a damage to Mr. Aldrich Lucas's reputation. And I would just like to say that the evidence within the dossier had been months in making, and that those who, Mr. Lethler, by the way, did not author it. He did not gather it all on his own. Um, but there were many other micronationalists, as Mr. Tierney pointed out in his response, which I'm not sure if you've seen it, so you should watch it, by the way. Um, the dossier was merely written by Mr. Leffler. The research was done by Mr. Mihans, Mr. Alexander Reinhardt, and Mr. Bradley Abdullahand, and I'm not sure if Mr. Tierney is aware of this, but I did do some research myself. Um, let's see. But it was pretty much a failed dossier. We all recognize this. Um, And uh, those who oppose Mr. Lether's return tech typically do so on pathetic grounds, and I use this word for its actual meaning, not to state that it's underwhelming, but they are pathetic grounds in that they are derived from emotions, um, from some sense of wrongdoing, etc. And more simply just oppose him on those pathetic grounds of emotions, and it seems that you are doing the exact same thing, um, because you feel as if he's guilty for some loss that you feel, obviously, um, that Mr. Lucas is gone, which, by the way, I'm quite excited that he is gone, and quite thankful. And those who have these, who are standing on these pathetic grounds of their arguments, there was quite a large consensus last time about his return, and he's given us basically the same barriers that he came to last time, and that is essentially, I will not talk to you if you do not want to talk to me. If you want to talk to me, then we can talk. Those are basically the same barriers that he's given this time as he did last time. Uh, Also, I would like to point out that correlation does not imply causation for the cause of Mr. Lucas's removal. You claimed that Mr. Lether's dossier caused harm, um, uh, and it didn't do so for Sandus. Um, and what caused harm, rather, is his own reputation. Was basically a failure of a micronation, and yet his own micronation was propping him up, and yet there wasn't any internal activity, there wasn't any power within his own micronation. Um, so it's quite clear that um, he was propped up by a failed micronation. And to be honest, I'm glad that Mr. Lucas is gone. He wasn't much of a micronationalist in the first place, and he should never have been given power at all. Um, Also, it seemed that you misinterpreted a few things. I did not say that you don't believe what you're saying, because, frankly, I would not be aware of that, and anyone can be delusional. What I did say is that it is impossible for me, for any rational or sentient human being, to believe this baseless argument. Um, you can be offended as you wish, but you misinterpreted me. Um, just as you misinterpret the people who endorsed Mr. Lether returning. I quite clearly said that all those in the community at the time of Mr. Lether who endorsed the invitation, this is the key point, who endorsed the invitation, are in support of his return. It sounds like, I'll skip that, pardon me, I'm reading from the minutes. Um, you You certainly don't hold a personal grudge against him, uh, even though I would argue that you somewhat do because of Mr. Lucas leaving. But it's just that you're not as knowledgeable as you should be on this topic. And finally, that comes to a few last points, and that the common paranoia by all of those who are against Mr. Um, Lether returning is, quite frankly, astounding. There is so much talk of if he should come back, if he should start getting influence, if he should want power, then it will mean the destruction of the community, then it will mean the loss of power, the loss of influence, um, of our states. And there's simply not enough recognition that he hasn't even addressed anyone in public. He's merely in the GUM chat room. He wasn't even here. Um, Saturday at all. So people are quite frankly overreacting, and everyone needs to calm down because Mr. Leffler has only been here for, I don't know, about an hour on Friday evening, and um, and he hasn't even addressed anyone uh, on the community at wide. To be honest, the response that was posted on Veritam Sandus, which by the way you continuously mispronounce, is not for uh, everyone to be alarmed at. It is not his address to the community. It was his address to those who supported the invitation. And as such, I posted it on um, the same newsletter, again, as you put it, um, that we wrote the invitation on. And you're simply backing up my previous argument that those who are against Mr. Lethal returning are, one, doing it for personal reasons, um, again, with emotions and pathos, and two, are afraid that their power may be lost. You've said it quite quite clearly that if he regains his influence, then, and I quote, then all of us who oppose him will be finished. He will he will never let us have any influence over anyone ever. And quite frankly, if this is what it's coming down to, he's not returning for power at all. He is returning because I invited him back for the purpose of advising, for the purpose of counseling, of for progression, and for simply another voice um, who is quite knowledgeable in not only intermicronational but also international affairs, and who has become well versed in the politics of many nations throughout the world. He's well versed, I know quite certainly, he's well versed in politics from the People's Republic of China, from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, um, from politics of the United Kingdom of Great Britain or Northern Ireland, as well as most recently when he did return. I remember that he was having a discussion, I believe, with Mr. Mr. Vanderhoven, pardon me, with Mr. Of Bradley Abdullahan, that uh, concerning Dutch politics. So to say that he isn't knowledgeable would be entirely untrue. Um, so without anything else to address, um, I I'm sure that you will respond, even though I quite frankly hope you don't, because this will continue to drag on. I just hope you're aware of that. But at any rate, I shall await your response, and typically, yeah, that's about it, actually. Uh, yes. So without further ado, I hope everyone has a happy Sunday. If you're in Britain, um, happy Mother's Day, I believe my calendar said. So, yes, good day.